You, as in Ann Arbor SPARK, which is the economic development arm of Washtenaw County, just received a $2.4 million grant. Was that from, I'm trying to remember which agency that was from.
Economic Development Administration.
Okay. There's so many government agencies.
EDA for short. Yes,
yeah,
I know.
It's hard to keep up with them all.
Hard to keep track. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking it was somebody else, but good you corrected me. So you caught the last part of that discussion on the Detroit Internet Exchange, which is really aimed at business folks. This will be aimed at everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the intention here was, we looked at it from really when the pandemic started. Everyone was obviously going and working from home, and we were looking at it from the perspective of who was best prepared in order to be able to take advantage of being able to work from home. And obviously it was people with access to broadband and internet access. Obviously that was a critical differentiator. And what was interesting for us is there was a study that had come out right at the start as everyone was working from home. And there were a couple, I think, economists at the University of Chicago that ranked all the different metropolitan markets in the United States and looked at who was most prepared for the working from home reality. And Washtenaw County on its own, because it's its own metropolitan statistical area, it's one of these kind of strange anomalies because we have things like the University of Michigan in our backyard. But Ann Arbor is its own MSA, and it ranked really high. We were something like 11th in the country in terms of overall MSAs of who was most prepared for that. But if you peel back the onion, which is the case a lot of times in places like Washtenaw County, there were places that were very prepared for that reality and had things like great access to internet and good coverage. And then there were other places that were less prepared for that. And one of the areas that we wanted to ensure was prepared for the new reality of work was the eastern side of Washtenaw County. And so that's sort of what led us to be able to kind of jump onto some work that was already being done in the city of Ann Arbor and try and say, can we try and expand that out into places like Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti Township and American Center for Mobility and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which I was sort of surprised when I read that. I mean, if any place in the state was, internet friendly, internet connected, it would be Ann Arbor with the University of Michigan and all the other things going on around here. And then, of course, I see all the studies. There was one recently that just came through that showed that 60% of the people who live in Ann Arbor have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. So
right.
You figure all those people are on their computers all the time. And then, of course, the pandemic drove me out of a studio in Detroit. Although I can go back, I kind of gotten used to the convenience of being able to do the show without having to drive to Detroit and back a whole afternoon right there, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I was amazed. So what specific parts, I know it's going to be something like 20 miles of broadband, but I mean, where is it not connected in Washtenaw County? Let's go back over that again. I'm still kind of surprised.
Well, yeah, I think it's true. And I think even your last guy was sort of indicating a little bit. I mean, there's been a big need for broadband in rural parts of Washtenaw County certainly for a long time to the point where communities are getting together and saying, actually, can we try and become our own internet service providers? How can we try and expand out, especially into more rural areas where there just has not been a whole lot of coverage historically. So there's been a broadband initiative that has really been stood up at the county level that's been existing there for a number of years that this has been on the radar. So it's timely that I think some of the infrastructure, the discussion that we've been having at the federal and at the state and other levels, is something that has been prescient, I think, perhaps at the county level, certainly in Washtenaw County. So the rural areas are definitely an area where there's been a need. And then what we identified is that there's two smart zones, if you will, in Washtenaw County. There's one that's focused in the city of Ann Arbor, and I think that's fairly well known. Then there's one in downtown Ypsilanti as well. We've had Spark East, which is our business incubator in downtown Ypsilanti for several years. And those are the two sort of smart zones that work together. And this was a way that we said, how can we try and actually connect some of the broadband work that was already been going on in the city of Ann Arbor? So actually, the city of Ann Arbor has been working on trying to connect a broadband linkage within the city itself to help provide another source of broadband opportunity. And basically, we're just taking that and one of the routes that we're going is right down Washtenaw Avenue, right through the heart of downtown Ypsi, and sort of ending at the American Center for Mobility, which is in Ypsilanti Township at Willow Run Airport. And that's essentially what we're trying to connect. It'll also go through and go along some areas on E-Course and across along Packard. So there's a little bit of a couple different ways, and there's a couple other business communities along those areas that are pretty local to Washtenaw that will try and serve with this. And that was really the idea and the opportunity that we had to go through this with the EDA.
So, since this is federal dough involved, is this a free connection? Is this a reduced cost connection? I mean, how much is it going to cost to
So
plug in?
this is really setting up the infrastructure so that another ISP could come in and actually service the market, right? So this is just making sure that the conduit is going to be in place so that when someone wanted to be able to provide that service, then there's another opportunity that they could try and connect in and provide it. So it's not going to be another. It's not trying to replace or compete with the existing ISPs or try and provide that service. It's another, literally the actual infrastructure of the conduit to be able to put into place. That's why it's only, a $2.4 million grant is something that might be, I don't know, 10 times more than what it might take to actually service that.
Yeah. All right. So essentially, this will really help. Well, especially the American Center for Mobility. We know what's going on. Actually, I know what's going on. You do. Perhaps we should talk a little bit about what's going on
Sure.
down there because people may not be aware of it.
Yeah, so the American Center for Mobility was a project that got set up over the past few years to really try and drive and redevelop. I mean, if you've been through Willow Run Airport, you've got the airport there, and then you've got or what in the past had been a gigantic manufacturing facility, some very historic roots going all the way back to World War II and beyond, and turn that into something that is a place where we want to try and focus on the future of mobility. I think that has been a big topic of discussion for the entire state for several years now. How are we going to ensure that we're not competing not only in the research and development and the manufacturing that we're already known for, but also in things like autonomous vehicles, the inclusion now of electric vehicles. I think those are all really important areas. And so the American Center for Mobility was stood up to be able to have a place to be able to do some of this specific testing, validation, research and development as it relates to both autonomous vehicles and then increasingly electric vehicles as well. I think what's one of the interesting points as it relates to EVs is that there was so much, we're talking about infrastructure here, there was so much infrastructure that was in place at ACM, or what is now ACM, because there was a 5 million square foot manufacturing facility. You had things like train tracks, you had triple overpasses, things that did not exist in a normal sort of place if you didn't have such a large area. And as a result, you also had a really large electric sort of infrastructure that was already in place there that isn't being served because there's not a gigantic manufacturing facility. So now there's a discussion around how can we make sure that we're leveraging those things that are already in the ground there to help drive forward things like EV charging, or what are sort of the needs around what that infrastructure could actually look like, which is a really important topic as we all consider whether or not we're going to get an electric vehicle or not.
Yeah, well, it's a step 2 from M City on North Campus. I can't remember how big that facility is, just a few acres compared
7
to
acres, I think, yeah.
7. It's very small.
Yeah, so
and the basic research,
yeah.
Basic research getting done there. And then I've had the opportunity to tour ACM and even be on the track. They had a press, before the pandemic, so I guess it'd been 2 years ago, when they took us out in a truck. That was a connected autonomous vehicle truck. The tractor was anyway. And so we did some stories about that. So I've had that opportunity to get out there and kind of eyeball things. Yeah, it's amazing what's around Ann Arbor in terms of auto R&D. You got the big Toyota Center down at the old Mental Health Hospital about 8 or 10 miles south of us here. You got all sorts of just about every automaker in the world has some connection to the area some way, or is talking to professors here, or doing basic research here, or something. It's really the brains of the auto industry are more kind of in Ann Arbor than they are in Detroit, right?
It's something that I think is probably, it's a story that is not always well known to many folks, is just how many things are there. Some ways because of, really it actually started, I think, because of the EPA facility that's on Plymouth Road. If you ever drive on North Campus near Plymouth Road, you'll pass by the facility where all of the engines are tested to ensure that they meet the emission standards that are required by the federal government. And because of that, a lot of the non-domestic OEMs they had to be nearby in order to be able to ensure that they were going to meet those requirements. And over time, they recognized, as Toyota and Hyundai and others have, oh, hey, there's actually some nice talent that we can try and tap into here. Let's make this more of a center for our activities. That was actually kind of a corollary of the thinking behind the reason for things like the American Center for Mobility is to say, let's make sure that we have a place and a reason that people need to come by and check this out. And then they can tap into all the other good things that are happening in Ann Arbor and in Southeast Michigan more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the timeline on this? You got the money. Well, it may not physically be in your bank yet, but you're getting the money. And then when does the actual construction and when is it going to be completed, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so that's going to take place. Really, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have everything finalized this fall, and then we'll be able to start the construction into 2022 and be able to actually do the work along the lines that we had wanted. So, and I think it won't take too much time to be able to put in place, but we're looking for a construction timeline to end towards the end of 2022.
Okay, so this is in-ground fiber, above-ground fiber? How's it going to be?
In the ground. It'll be in-the-ground fiber.
Thank God, I'll tell you, because the last few storms that have gone through Ann Arbor, we've lost power a couple of times here, so...
I think we're mindful of that and the redundancy that's needed for that. So, I know this will do everything it could be to not be a disruption to your work.
All right, and let's zero right in. Is this going to help Spark in any way? I mean, is it going to bring you more clients? Anything like that?
I think from this is something where, as we're looking across as sort of a regional organization to say, okay, how can we try and play a role to really fit in and ensure that there's going to be these things that could come up from a regional perspective where you might have, say, the city of Ann Arbor doing something and you've got down the street, literally another city that could be doing something else. I think that's really a value add for regional organizations to say, okay, let's look across the entirety of this. And is there low-hanging fruit that we should be paying attention to? And I really think that kind of thinking is going to be only more important as we sort of figure out what is going to look like from other things that are coming out of the rescue plan to say, okay, there's going to be more infrastructure needs. Let's think about this in a way that is going to be regional and not necessarily benefiting just one particular municipality. Let's think about how we can do this across an entire region. And so that's one of the areas that Spark as an organization is going to kind of try and consider these things. So I'm hopeful, I guess, fingers crossed, that this could just be one example of some ways that we can try and work regionally on this. And for us, at the end of the day, we want to ensure that people are successful from early stage startup companies all the way to large mature companies. And if we can have things like the infrastructure in place as a result of some of the benefits that we've seen from the federal government come out for this, then that's going to be the place that we're going to try and play a role.
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed. I've been tracking the infrastructure bill because there's so much in there that's technology focused. And one of the issues that the Republicans appear to be hung up on is broadband. The other one being transportation in the sense of bus lines and things like that. So I'm not sure why that would be, but hopefully that'll get passed sometime this week. Otherwise, we go into August recess and, drags out.
Well, I think even regardless of that, there's already some things that are on the way as it relates to the funding that's already been passed. And so the way that this sort of goes is it trickles through the various agencies. And now we're having discussions around what that could look like. So like I said, fingers crossed, only more to come that we'll be able to try and take advantage of.
All right. So I'm going to give you a chance to do a plug here for Ann Arbor SPARK. If folks want to find out more about what's going on in economic development in Washtenaw County, where do they go?
So I would just say just go to our website, which is annarborusa.org. A couple things that I think might be helpful and interested people there is that we've got a pretty active job portal that we've had for some period of time. It's kind of carved a little bit of a niche for some technology and other related jobs that are in the Ann Arbor area. So I would go and check that out. That's just annarborusa.org/jobs. And then we've got, if you're interested in learning more about the community overall, we've done some market reports about things like automotive research and development that we had talked about, the life science community, the technology community. So we're just trying to make sure that we have a good pulse on all the things that are happening in the backyard that people may not hear or think about when they think about Ann Arbor, which tends to go towards, college football and the like.
Yes, starting in another month or so, right?
Apparently, we are well into fall now, right? We're in the end of July, so let's start looking ahead for that.
Yes, I just got my season's tickets delivered in the mail today, so U of M alum. All right, well, thanks very much, Phil Santer from Ann Arbor SPARK, the Economic Development Group of Washtenaw County. We're talking about the new $2.4 million grant they've received to expand the broadband out to further out in the county so that everybody's better connected.